Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Engineering Change Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brett Hillesheim with ACEC Georgia, but I couldn't do it by myself. The Minnie to my Mickey or the Mickey to my Minnie, is that too close? Anyway, we're broadcasting live from we're recording live, not broadcasting, recording live from the Contemporary Resort at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida, at the Georgia Engineer Summer Conference with another great interview. Joining us today is Frank Lazaro. Frank, welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
It's a lot of fun.
Tell us a little bit about yourself first.
So interesting, my career has been really revolving around like technology and marketing. And so I've kind of shifted through several industries, and then probably in the last 5 to 6 years gravitated towards the AE industry and worked for an environmental firm here in Atlanta for a good number of years. And then I started thinking about how I could use technology to really kind of make my job easier, because I realized that most AE firms don't have really big marketing departments, unless you're a really big firm. But most smaller firms don't. They just don't have the ability to have 5, 6, 8, 10 people. So I leaned into technology, and what I found was I was using earlier versions of AI and other technology platforms, and I'm like, there's got to be other firms that could benefit from what I'm trying to do. And what I am doing. And so I went out and I sent out a couple speaker proposals, and I started getting on the speaking circuit with, a variety of different associations, including ACEC Georgia. And it just kind of turned into, I'm like, this could really be an opportunity to do some consulting.
Yeah.
So last June, I went out on my own.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Very good.
Well, it's a service that a lot of firms can use. When I speak broadly about firms, I'm not talking about anybody individually, so I can get away with it. But a lot of firms really don't understand how important marketing is.
Right.
And then I think they misuse terms. Like one that I struggled with when I first joined the industry, people would talk about business development. Oh, they're the BD person.
Right.
Well, BD in our industry can mean anything from somebody who's actually meeting with potential clients and bringing in business to somebody who's just preparing a response to a proposal.
And I struggled with that early on too,
Yeah.
because my vision of a BD person is someone that's going out to get new business.
Right. That's actual business development. Yeah.
It's business development. The other thing that I struggled with too is that we also interchange marketing with, it's really proposal development.
Right.
So when you say like, oh, we have our marketers, like, okay, great, I'm taking over a marketing team. Like, what kind of marketing you do? Well, all we do is proposal.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, well, so those interchanging of the terms were a little different. But what you find with AI, and this is interesting, because it comes across a lot of industries. And the way I look at the AE industry as a whole, it's really professional services. And the things that we do in the AE space are really no different than what you see some people doing in the financial services space, what you see in the accounting space, what you see in the legal space. They all kind of operate in that same manner. They have proposals going out, they have content that needs to be created, and then they have projects. We just happen to move dirt and build buildings and build bridges. Lawyers may do something a little different, but it's interesting is that...
Different kind of dirt.
Definitely different kind of dirt. But it is interesting is that regardless of the industry, they all need this benefit in some way or fashion. The challenging part with the AEC industry as a whole, though, is that we tend to be late technology adopters.
Which is weird, right?
You would think it's weird.
What we do is technology, and yet we're reluctant to change.
And the funny thing is, you'll hear all AE firms say, oh, come on, utilization. Well, technology can help you with that. Well, we don't want to do technology. So it's funny on how they understand that they need to be more efficient at some of these things that they do, but they're also very reluctant to adopt new things.
Yeah.
They tend to be laggards in this industry. Now, the challenging part with AI, though, is if you wait 3 months, you're 6 months behind.
Yeah.
If you wait 6 months, you're a year behind. So, from the presentation this morning, the challenge that I really wanted to convey to everyone is like, you can't let this sit.
No.
Even if you're not going to use it today, you have to be thinking about it. Because if not, you're going to be very, very much behind the eight ball.
Yeah, I think our folks, they don't necessarily understand AI, machine learning, large language models. And the main thing they don't understand is that like every other change that's ever affected our industry has been, linear. And this change is exponential. So,
And then it continues to be exponential too, right? So there was like this huge tidal wave, and then they didn't realize there was another tidal wave and another tidal wave.
Yeah.
Because every time I turn around, there's a new feature, there's a new tool, there's something new.
And you
that's coming
shared
out.
a slide this morning from, what was it, 13 months ago of the...
12 applications.
Yeah, 12 applications, and now it's Thousands?
I mean, at one point, I think someone was trying to track it and they had to stop because there were so many tools coming out they couldn't keep up with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's literally 20 applications per day.
Yeah.
And it was amazing that everyone kind of gravitated towards it, which is interesting. What is also challenging too, and I think AE firms struggle with this too, whether it's an ERP system, whether it's a CRM system, they don't like applications that aren't really geared for the industry. So when you think about Salesforce
Right.
is a great CRM system, but you don't have a lot of AE firms on Salesforce
Right.
because it's not an AE
Right.
CRM system. So you have companies like Uninet and Deltek, they have been very successful simply because they've actually either branded themselves or they're targeting those markets. You're seeing that with AI. There is no AI-specific AE application today. Starting to come, you're seeing some of that happen, but it is interesting is that those AEC firms only gravitate when they have we target engineers. They're like, then we need that application.
Oh,
and it's
let's get
literally
that.
the same application with a funny name.
Yeah, or it may not be as good an application. It may not be the best tool for the
Yes.
job.
Yeah. But
That's
somebody
also
figured it out how to market
how to market it to
Right.
engineers and architects. That's interesting.
Exactly.
That's
So-
interesting.
But yeah, so it's fascinating you're starting to see, at least the firm owners that I'm talking to, they all recognize that it's coming, there's value there. The big challenge is where do I start? How do I start? And there's still a lot of open-ended questions. What do we do? What do we do about our data, and how do we protect our customer client data? And there's so many different things that need to be still fleshed out over a period of time.
Yeah, and there's a lot of general fear out there about the term AI. So, can you break that down for us real quick? What is AI?
Are there terminators involved?
Yeah.
Yes, not yet.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Close.
All right, well.
So it's interesting when you think about the AI landscape. I think there's 12 or 14 different types of AI, and we've been using AI honestly for decades for a variety of things. And you see it a lot in the manufacturing where they'll use cameras, and if the product has a defect, it kicks it out. So it's just AI has a set of images of what the product should look like. If the picture doesn't look like that, it goes into the waste. And so we've used that, and they've been very dumb AI and very, very specific to a task. And then it started opening up a little bit more, and then you have a less dumb AI, which is like your spell check in Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
It's an AI. As I type in real time, it tells me whether or not I'm spelling things right or wrong,
Yeah.
but all it is looking at a database of a dictionary.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden ChatGPT comes out, and now it's like this vast amount of data that is out there, and how do you do that? So when you kind of break it down, the manufacturing type AI, that's not really going to impact our industry. Maybe some of the image recognition, I mentioned it during the presentation about construction site cameras being able to recognize, and then there's an AI firm that's targeting bridge inspections, which is a fascinating product where they're taking pictures and they're using those pictures to create risk assessments. Well, I think that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
The vast majority of us, it's all around generative AI. And all that really means is that it generates something. Whether it's copy, whether it's a video, whether it's an audio, whatever it is, it's generating something. And that's where you're going to see the biggest impact, at least to our industry, particularly for firms that write a lot of reports. So if you're an environmental firm, you're a geotech firm, you probably tend to write a lot. You're reporting out, you have data coming in, you have reports going out. It's going to help you streamline some of that. So the fancy AI that you talk about, go back to the Terminator reference, that's movie magic. That doesn't really exist today. I think people translate the movie did this, so therefore the AI could do that. They don't recognize that the AI is actually very dumb in that sense. It doesn't pick up on inflection.
Right.
It doesn't pick up on nuance. It doesn't pick up on context. You have to give it all of that in order to get better results out of it. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle is they go in, they ask it a basic question. It's open-ended, no context, nothing, and then the AI produces a very generic answer, and they're like, well, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
The importance of the prompt.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then if you don't get that output that you're looking for, following up with an enhancing prompt.
Yes.
A lot of people don't get that.
No,
They
and-
treat it like Google.
They
Yeah.
treat it like Google.
Yeah.
And
Write me a term paper.
so it's interesting when I teach how to do the prompt. They call it prompt engineering, by the way, which I think is fascinating.
I like that.
When I
Yeah.
teach the prompt engineering, I usually ask the students to say, hey, listen, write the prompt. This is what I want you to achieve. Write the prompt the way that you want. And we go around the room, and it's usually 1 sentence, 2 sentences long. And then I show them my example, and they see 3 or 4 paragraphs. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, why is your prompt so detailed? Because I'm going into all the context.
Right.
Like, this is my firm, this is my customers, this is what I'm trying to do, this is how I'm going to use it. as humans, we just assume, we infer these things, and so I don't have to explain it to you. It just happens. But the AI, there is no inference.
Right.
So you have to go in and give it that level of detail in order to get the response that you want. And then once you tell them to do that, it's always it's a light bulb moment for like, oh, wait. So one of the game-changing things that I love to tell people, I'm like, did you know that to give it the context, you can just ask the AI to ask you questions?
Yeah.
So usually I'll write my prompt and I said, this is what I'm trying to do. And I'll turn around and say, before you start, ask me a series of questions about my company, my products, my services, anything that you need to know to help better answer that question. And it'll usually come back with anywhere from 5 to 12 questions. And you just answer those questions, and then it takes those answers as context and then does it and gives you the appropriate response.
Yeah.
Which gets it closer to where you need it to be. The other game-changing thing that I tell people to do is that you go in, and before you start, confirm you understood what I'm asking. And what ChatGPT will do is it'll come back and give you a summary of how it thinks you're asking the question. What that does is it gives you an opportunity to read how ChatGPT is interpreting what you're saying, and then you'll realize how wrong your prompt is. And then you can go back and change your prompt and change your instructions. You ask it again, hey, confirm you understand. And then once it confirms it in a way that you want to, then you say, okay, now create content.
So it's kind of like communicating between a husband and a wife.
Yes.
What did I just say?
Can you repeat that back to me?
That may be an example of too much inference.
Yeah.
Right. Don't assume. Right. So you can't assume that it's a mind reader, but those two basic prompt techniques are things that people don't do. No one ever says, oh, I never thought of having it ask me questions.
Right.
Right. I'm always asking it questions. Goes back to your Google reference.
Yeah.
But the other game-changing one is literally ask it, explain to me how you think I'm asking this question. And it'll literally give you a whole paragraph on this is how I think you're asking it. And then you'll read it and be like, yeah, that's what I was asking. And then, or you'll read it and be like, no, that wasn't what I was asking. So maybe I'm not doing this very well. Let me retry that again. So it just helps streamline getting to a better response.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Now, you said during your presentation that firms have to have a plan for this.
Absolutely.
Because chances are somebody at their firm is already using it without them knowing.
Without a doubt. I don't know how many conversations I've had since after the presentation, and they've all said that, particularly the younger staff, under 40, under 35, they've already started playing with it. Because there's free versions, there's a variety of things. You can't assume that your employees aren't using this. Particularly the younger staff, they're definitely using it, and for a variety of different things.
And I think you pointed out too, like Microsoft has an embedded AI now. So if you use
everything.
if you use Microsoft products, your firm's already using it.
Whether you want to or not, right? And I think you can pay for the more advanced features, but it's already in, like the basic functionality is already embedded in everything.
Yeah.
And that goes back to my comment around why I think Microsoft's probably going to win at the end of the day is that if you're on every computer and every time, and they are everywhere where you're working, you're going to use it. So if you're in Microsoft Word, if you're in Outlook, you're in Teams, you're on the web browser, Microsoft wants to be there. And so if they're there, that's great, but everyone's going to use it.
Yeah.
So you have to have a plan, even if you don't think you're going to use it now. Like, you know what? We're not going to do anything for the next 6 months when it comes to AI. Doesn't mean that you immediately stop thinking about it. You have to be like, how do I integrate this when it comes, and what are the rules? And it goes back to the concept of AI policy. It's important. Establish the rules. And what you find is that you'll probably revisit it and say, okay, we're going to kind of allow these things and disallow this. And then eventually you'll get comfortable with where it's at, but you cannot ignore this at all. I mean, it's going to be in your phones and computers. It's going to be in your car. I mean,
A lot of cases it already is.
yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed this on the Apple Maps now. When you get in your car consistently at the same time, it says, oh, you're going into the office, and starts giving you directions.
Yep.
Or I get into the car at 6 o'clock at night, it says, oh, you're going to the gym, gives me directions.
Yep.
Or an hour later, I get back in the car, it says, oh, now you're going home. So it's already starting to learn those things.
Yeah.
Now think about that. You start thinking about it starts understanding your behavior, it can start predicting things for you. And from a business perspective, I told this to someone the other day, and I said, it's coming. Could you imagine if Sully sent me an email and says, hey, do you have time to have lunch next week, Thursday? And while I'm looking at the email, something pops up on the side that's already looked at my calendar and says, yes, you're available.
Wow.
How much time did I just save?
Yeah.
Or you think about that, even outside of, say, personal lunches, now it's a client meeting, right? Where Sully sends me an email and says, hey, don't forget to send me the notes from that meeting. And then it automatically puts a task on my calendar, says, don't forget to send the notes. So you can start seeing it's going to start just bleeding itself in very, very nuanced ways. But I think people are going to be like, oh, this is great because it just helps me remember things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same reason the algorithm, as we like to refer to it, is so powerful.
Yep.
We've decided that having things presented to us that we might want is a good, and so we're willing to share that information in order to receive those prompts.
Those benefits, right?
Yeah.
And so Amazon does a great job with that. I don't know if you've ever shopped on
Indeed,
Amazon.
they
which,
do.
which
They
you know, every now and then I'll get like a notification. It's like, hey, you bought dog treats 2 months ago, and based on your order history, meaning that they've looked at it, you order dog treats every 2 months. Do you want to order them now? Like, well,
Do you want to put it on subscription? Do you want? Yeah.
Right. So you see retailers kind of leaning that way. So how does that translate to our industry? How does that make us more efficient? And I think we always struggle with, and you always hear from leaders talk about utilization, overhead, all this stuff. AI is really going to have that big impact on that. To where if you can reduce your administrative overhead by 5%, and I'm not even talking big gains, how does that translate into more revenue recognition later, right? Meaning that more billable work, all these other things. So I think that there's huge benefits for our industry once that starts to kind of filter itself down, because I think it hits those really those hot spots that firm leaders kind of focus on sometimes as utilization and productivity. And I think AI is going to have a big impact on that longer term.
Well, the huge part about that is small changes to utilization, small changes to multipliers, small changes to overhead actually do have a really big dollar impact.
Compounding effect.
Yeah.
Because you think about, if you're a 100-person firm, if you're saving 5% across 100 people,
Right.
then it becomes real dollars, right?
Yeah.
It's just not an isolated where it's just Frank's having an increase in utilization. But I think we want to caveat that, say, hey, listen, it's never gonna make someone 100% utilized. There's no magic button.
Right.
But you, again, back to your point, Sully, around the margins, if you can increase someone's utilization by 3 or 4 or 5%, that's going to have huge impacts in terms of how you can, recognize your revenue faster and get those things done, projects on time.
Now, some of the chatter I hear when you're talking about people is that AI will replace people.
Not true.
Yeah, that's going to say.
Not true.
It may replace jobs or tasks.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I kind of frame it up is that it may help you not grow headcount as fast, right? Because right now, what's your solve to get more proposals out the door? More bodies.
Right.
Our business is a professional services firm, and doesn't matter what kind of consulting you are. Your business revolves around two things: the number of heads and the number of hours you can get out of those heads to do the work. So the only way that we can solve this right now is to add more bodies. And then we're very reluctant to do that, so then we kind of push more back on the people. Where AI comes in, you're not going to be able to eliminate the staff that you have, but you can actually get that staff to do more. So you go back to that Harvard business case study where you see the increased productivity anywhere from 12 to 47%.
Wow.
You're getting a 1.5% increase in terms of productivity from one person. So 2 people act like 3 people. 3 people act like 6 people. So you see the multiplying effect of how AI can just take people and allow them to do more without actually stressing them out and overworking them. So I don't think it's about eliminating people, but I do think that it will be about allowing firms to manage headcount in terms of they don't have to continue to add more bodies. They can do more with what they have. But that comes back down to training, effectively implementing it correctly.
Very good.
One thing that I've thought a lot about in this context, and I don't know if you have as well, is there's a big upside to all this: the efficiencies, the utilization, all those sorts of things. But we still are in an industry which is largely billing on time, not billing on value. How do you see those things intersecting, and more specifically, like what do firms individually and us as an industry advocacy organization need to be thinking about relative to changing that business model?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, the way to kind of frame that up. When you kind of think of the value prop, AI is going to be, or can be in some instances, more accurate than a human being.
Right.
So you start thinking about structural inspections. Technology has been a game changer in terms of finding defaults in structures. Whether it's a parking structure, whether it's a bridge, or whatever it is, you see the technology. Penetrating radar, all these things have really kind of enabled people to kind of see in things that they normally couldn't see with a human being, human eye. So what I see the value is that the technology is going to allow firms to end up being a little bit more, say, accurate over time by implementing the technology. So it could be accurate in terms of analyzing data, right? Being able to consume a mass amount of data and then be able to kind of produce a trend or report faster than you normally would. So sometimes time is money, right? So you want to be able to kind of get that information back to your client. So I think being able to process data, finding errors, using the technology then to kind of do things more efficiently and effectively than a human being or a human eye could do, I think is where you're going to really see the value to that. Now, the question is then it comes back down to the what does this cost? So all new technology costs something, right? So is there an immediate cost savings? I don't know. Probably not. I think that, I think the things stay where they are from a value perspective. But I do see things, as with most technology, that the cost of those things will reduce over time. So the value to the customer is not only do they get better accuracy with the implementation of AI, but longer term, they should see a cost savings because the technology will become cheaper, it'll become more available, more people will use it. You go back to the surveyors, right? Survey equipment's really expensive, but drone equipment's even more expensive, and GPS equipment's even more expensive. But you make those investments knowing that you get more accurate survey plots and all these other things. But over time, that stuff is going to become cheaper, and then it's going to become, I won't say commoditized, but it's just going to be more cost effective for the end user or the end consumer at the end of the day.
Oh, and eventually all these technologies, we kind of started off talking about the reluctance to adopt and being kind of counterintuitive. Like ultimately these technologies become not cutting edge, but actually expected by the client. If you don't have this.
Oh, I agree. So go back, you remember when like AutoCAD came out and then the licenses were like, you had to buy like a license and you couldn't get an upgrade. And it was like every year you're spending thousands of dollars to get these licenses. And now they've moved to a subscription model, right? Now it's like, from a cost perspective, it's more cost effective, but now they have you locked in for life.
Yeah.
Sure.
Not that you weren't locked in for life anyway because you were using it anyway, but you can kind of see the subscription model is that I can open up my software, whether it's Adobe, whether it's AutoCAD or whatever it is, to where it was super expensive, $2,000-$3,000 for a single license, to now I can get you on a subscription for $79 a month. Right, so you've seen we've already made that switch where we see the cost effectiveness and it becomes more expected, right? Everybody, we want digital reviews. You got to use Bluebeam. You got to use Adobe. You got to do these things, and we've all adopted to that. AI is going to be the same way.
Very cool. Very cool.
And I think there's potentially at least on the front end, early adoption also brings with it a market distinction between your firm and other firms.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Market differentiator.
I can't imagine that you could sit back and confidently think that your competitors aren't going to do this.
Right.
Right? Because everyone's going to be affected by it. It's the ones that actually get ahead of the curve that I think are going to see the benefit sooner, and the ones that delay. I mean, one of the things I do want to kind of highlight on this is that I know we've focused a little bit on the project delivery side. But there are other aspects to AI that's going to impact most AE firms that I think is going to be very beneficial to them. Again, like a marketing department at AE firm, your HR department tends not to be very big.
Right.
So how do you develop training? How do you develop policy handbooks? How do you write job descriptions? How do you use AI to help with your recruiting? There's a lot of things on that aspect, and recruiting is a big issue for our industry.
It's our number one issue, recruiting and retention.
Right.
And of course, the other, it's worth noting, particularly since ACEC Georgia, 80% of our members are 60 employees or less. The smaller the firm, the more likely they are to benefit from these technologies, because the person who's doing an HR in a 50-person firm is probably somebody who's also practicing engineering. They're not an HR professional. So being able to tap into best practices, not having to reinvent the wheel every time, is a huge time saver and ultimately ends up in a better product.
Go back to the presentation when I talk about the concept of upskilling. So you can take someone and, when you go back to an engineer and say, hey, write me a job description, what do you want this person to do? They're going to struggle with kind of figuring that out. They're going to probably go back to a previous job description and change a few things. But is that the most effective way to recruit somebody?
Right.
Use AI to kind of help you do that. So when you think about it, it's not necessarily, yes, it is going to impact the project delivery side, but do not overlook the aspects of the other parts of the business that aren't necessarily front facing.
Yeah.
Your accounting and finance. We had a great conversation earlier about, wouldn't it be great that you didn't have to do a go, no-go process? That you put the opportunity into the CRM, and based on your opportunity history, it automatically tells you whether or not this is a good or bad opportunity. So you don't have to have someone fill something out. It's just enter the opportunity and the system does it for you. Doesn't exist, but that is a great feature. That's a time saver. Same thing when you start thinking about, the go, no-go process, the one thing, but then you start thinking about other aspects, like from a firm leader perspective, what are you worried about? Like when you think about billing, like who's past due? Wouldn't it be great to get a report to sit there and say, these customers are likely to pay late? And so then you could proactively start reaching out to them prior to them being late, so they actually start paying closer to being on time.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we overlook, but we do spend a lot of time as leaders sometimes sitting in meetings and they're going, okay, what are we doing with the past dues? Did you reach out to the client? Did we send a letter? Did we do this? And it's all manual.
Yeah.
Maybe AI at some point is going to be able to help with that. So I won't overlook the administrative or the back office pieces.
Right.
I think it's going to impact the whole firm as a whole.
Oh yeah.
So you're a 60-person firm, for example, like the average ACEC Georgia member firm. How do you get started with navigating all this?
So there's a couple of ways that I've seen firms do this, and it's mostly going through just like the industry associations. There are some associations that are kind of really leaning into the education side. So you have your PSMJs of the world that have been doing it for 30, 50 years. Yeah, PSMJ is probably 50 years,
Probably.
right?
Wow.
Or longer. But whatever it is, you have those kinds of associations that have been really kind of focused on the educational side, the content side, right, versus the advocacy side. So I would lean into those organizations because there's some cost-effective training that is out there for people to lean into, and almost every single one of them, regardless of what they're doing on that side, they're all offering some form of education. The other thing too is don't overlook any of the free resources like LinkedIn Learning. There's some Udemy. There's some stuff online. Even Google has some basic AI training. But again, it goes back to the comment I made earlier, is that if it's not specific to the AE space, they tend to not want to do it.
Right.
So I would lean into the different associations that are focused on the training. I think that's kind of where it is. Also lean into organizations like ACEC Georgia around, attending conferences like this, because I think it allows you to start thinking about, okay, I saw that presentation. I have an idea where I can go with this now. I need to go find a consultant. I need to go send my people to some kind of training. All too often, as an industry, we're so happy to spend so much money to send people to a PM boot camp, but we won't send anybody to AI or marketing training simply because there's not a direct correlation to the revenue sometimes.
Right.
I think in this instance, though, it's going to have profound impacts across your firm, so you really need to be thinking about, one, getting some training dollars as a
Yeah.
whole, and then encouraging your local association to do better training.
Yeah. No, I think it's. I think there's also a retention benefit there, particularly for your younger employees who want to embrace these technologies, being able to invest in them, to be able to understand them. But it's like we were talking earlier. This is an evergreen topic, partly because of that reluctance that you spoke about.
Yeah.
Hey guys, you need to do this. Here's why you need to do this, and here's how you do this, and here's who you can talk to about doing this. Just kind of continuing to get the message out.
Well, I think you guys are doing a great job, because I think Sully, your team has come to me and they're like, hey, for the Future Leaders program, they want to evolve the content that I typically do into AI. And I'm like, absolutely. And I think that's where your members are going to really kind of understand how and where they need to go for this training. Even if ACEC Georgia doesn't offer that specific training, at least you've given them the orientation that you need to be paying attention to this. And this is how it's going to impact you. And it's going to make you a better leader. It's going to make you a better firm. But yeah, even on the Futures Leaders program, Chandler's already come back to me and says, okay, we need to pivot the content.
Yeah.
I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah.
When do you want me to come back? She's like, November. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, things change pretty fast, and
Yeah.
you've got to be responsive to that to make sure that you're giving folks what they need to know now, what they needed to know, and not what they needed to know 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, again, going back to the presentation I gave earlier, that's why I always like to kind of end that presentation with like, here are your 8 takeaways.
Yeah.
If you could do these, like literally walk out of this conference, go back to your office, if you can focus on these 8 things, and they're not very hard things.
Yeah, it's not overwhelming.
Not overwhelming. It's some basic foundational stuff that puts you in a much better footing versus some other firms. And again, goes back to the last 2 bullets on there, really kind of focused on understand the state of your business, the health of your business from a data perspective, and training. Right? So do all these things, and then those last 2 are really vitally important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Frank, if there's a firm out there who is looking for a consultant to connect with, how can one get in touch with you?
Oh, easy enough. So you can find me on LinkedIn, which is pretty straightforward, just Frank Lazaro there. Or you can go to my website, franklazaro.ai, and I got information on there that you can just reach out. And if I can't help you, I know plenty of people that I can connect them with and give them get their compass oriented to find their way when it comes to AI.
Very good.
Well, I know you've helped a lot of people today with the general session. Appreciate you taking time to spend with us on the podcast to get more information out to our members and listeners.
Yeah.
And just appreciate your time. Appreciate you being with us.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and this has been a lot of fun. This is my 2nd year in a row.
Yeah.
Loved it. So, hopefully I'll be back again next year, and this is great.
Great. Well, everybody out there, thanks for listening or watching, no matter how you're digesting your podcast right now. For Engineering Change Podcast, I'm Brett.
I'm Sully.
And we'll talk to you next time.
Intro and closing music. Intention by the Down and Outs. Music used with permission. Engineering Change is a production of ACEC Georgia. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.